Deliberate, cerebral, and focused, General Ibrahim Babangida is not a historical accident. His years as a leader were years of decisiveness and breathtaking reforms. Indeed, years of considerable and outstanding courage. The Babangida years are captured in Nigeria's history as a time when one man courageously stepped forward in an honest attempt to change the status quo and challenge a tradition of timid leadership and inconsistent state policies. With a rare gift of foresight, statesmanship, and calmness, IBB's rare combination of boldness and compromise redefined and re-engineered governance in Nigeria. This documentary, entitled Ibrahim Babangida, A Life of Vision, Courage, and Reform, is a conscious attempt to document a critical phase in Nigeria's historical journey as a nation still in search of the soul of its nationhood. Born on August 17, 1941 in Mina, in today's Niger State, to Aisha and Muhammad Babangida, Ibrahim Babangida received early Islamic education before attending primary school between 1950 and 1956. He later enrolled at Government College Bida, Niger State, for his secondary education. The young Ibrahim Babangida's ambition was to become a civil engineer. However, different career guidance options by the northern establishment compelled him to enroll into the Nigerian Army in 1962. Ibrahim listened to the wise counsel of his forebears and enlisted in the Nigerian Army. Barely 5 years into the military career, there was the Nigerian Civil War, which began in 1967. The call to national duty is perhaps the most memorable task in General Babangida's military career.
I went to war in 1967. What struck me was, here am I. I knew a lot of colleagues with whom we trained together, with whom we schooled together. Now here am I facing them in war. I never imagined that I will find myself in a situation of war with people who have been my friends, who unfortunately were on the other side. Well, I think I did because it was a job I had to do. And maybe it is a job that they on the other end have to do. But I found that really, really very touching moment in my life.
In 1969, a few months to the end of the Civil War, Babangida married Mariam. They remained married until her sudden painful passage in December of 2009. The marriage produced 4 children: Aisha, Muhammad, Aminu, and Halima. On record, General Murtala Muhammad, as head of state, was determined to leave a legacy in Nigeria and his constituency, the military. Murtala Muhammad embarked on a program of demobilizing the military barely 5 years after the Civil War. He found no better candidate for the assignment than the gap-footed young officer. Babangida was appointed head of the Demobilization Committee by the then Chief of Army Staff, General Theophilus Danjuma. That appointment marked another major professional assignment for Ibrahim Babangida. Unfortunately, just at the nick of submitting the demobilization report, another rumpus occurred. Lieutenant Colonel Dimka was on national radio to announce the overthrow of the young administration of General Murtala Muhammad. That was on February 13, 1976. The dangerous task to flush out the military adventurers fell on Ibrahim Babangida's shoulders.
So when I got into the army headquarters, I went up and people were saying, "Where have you been? We are looking for you." I didn't know, quite frankly, what was happening at that time. So I looked at my watch And I said, no, but I wasn't late. The conference was supposed to start at 9 o'clock. Then they said, somebody said, didn't you hear? And it was, so I went up to go to see the Chief of Army Staff, General T.Y. Danjuma. He said, Ibrahim, where have you been? We have been looking for you. I said, we are not late, sir. So he said, didn't you hear what happened? I said, no. He said, Dimka, there was a coup d'etat. I want you to go and flush him out.
He decided to apply minimum force. He confronted Dimka unarmed. Typical of the charismatic IBB, he accomplished this task and earned an enduring accolade for his gallantry.
At the time this happened, Babangida was in Lagos, and I was in Kaduna, 1 division Kaduna. The GOC at the time was General Alani Akinriyade, and I was commanding 81 the battalion in Kaduna, in the infantry battalion in Kaduna. Babangida led the troops. So led the troops from, I think it was Ikeja cantonment or to the radio station, and chased Dimka out of the place.
The coup was foiled, even though it claimed the life of General Muritala Muhammad.
As I moved along to go to Ikeja, a lot of thoughts were coming into my head at that time about whether my troops were loyal or what am I going to find at that time, and so on and so forth. Fortunately, I had very good soldiers at that time, 4th Regiment. They were very loyal. They were very, very, very loyal indeed. So I went into the cantonment. I had no problem whatsoever getting into the cantonment to go and join the troops.
The military secretary at the time, Colonel Muhammad Gadonasco, said of Colonel Babangida, "This officer at the greatest risk to his personal safety and the nation, in particular, confronted the leader of the attempted coup." On December 31, 1983, the military struck again. This time, the democratically elected government of President Shehu Usman Aliyu Shagari was ousted from office. Major General Muhammadu Buhari became head of state, and Ibrahim Babangida assumed the office of Chief of Army Staff. He was a member of the Supreme Military Council, the highest decision organ of the military government.
He was first Chief of Army Staff after that coup. And then he brought some changes to the army, reinforced the divisions, funded the divisions properly, and cared about the soldiers and the officers and their families.
Barely 20 months into the government of General Buhari on August 27, 1985, Nigerians woke up once more to the familiar but eerie sound of martial music. This time, no one was particularly excited, especially after the trauma of the uninspiring presidency of Shehu Shagari and the authoritarian regime of Buhari and Idi Agbon. It was to a nation in despair that Brigadier General Sani Abacha announced a change in its leadership. Abacha's reasons did not differ fundamentally from what he had earlier broadcast in 1983, having heralded the December 1983 coup that brought Major General Muhammadu Buhari to power. Brigadier Joshua Dongonyaro would later come on air to explain the rationale for this sudden change in government. Major General Ibrahim Babangida was subsequently announced as the head of the new government.
I will tell you a story. One of our seniors, Ibrahim Tayo, colonel who died during the same Dimka coup. One day we were traveling and he saw some junior officers reading a book, How to Stage a Coup. And Ibrahim Tayo was a very brilliant person and he's well read. So he got the book out of the hand of the young officer. He said he gave him a chapter in the book He said, make sure you recite this chapter, get it into your brain, let it be. And I didn't know then. So I said, what did you tell, what chapter is it? Then he gave me the book. I saw the chapter, The Consequences of Failure. He said they should read it very well and understand it. And always I was remembering that story, the consequences of failure. So you find those of you involved are going to be killed. Those of you who connived will also be killed. Everybody will be killed once it fails. So those are things that I keep on remembering. And so we had a meeting on the 30th of December, I think, and we were well coordinated. We were always in contact. I was in contact with David Mark here in Mina and so on, but because he was the governor of the state. And what was paramount in our minds was that there shall be no blood whatsoever. And I'm glad to say that the soldiers were well disciplined, the officers were well trained and well led, and we carried the letter without any blood whatsoever.
In a classic demonstration of uncommon leadership, the new military leader adopted the novel title of military president. In his maiden broadcast as president on August 27, he gave expression to his civil disposition. President Babangida expressed the readiness to unite the country.
I'm pleased to take this opportunity to declare once again, therefore, that this administration attaches the greatest importance to constructive and helpful criticisms as well as the freedom of the press, and to declare further that the administration also attaches the greatest importance of fundamental human rights. A visible improvement in the standard of living of our people will not come overnight, of course. It is nonetheless feasible to take a meaningful action now which would alleviate the deprivation and misery of the large majority of our population within a short time. Thus, the administration will, in particular, take measures to check our galloping inflation and soaring unemployment. Part of these measures may require a review of our ongoing negotiations with the International Monetary Fund and our current debt servicing ratio. And I trust that we will be able to count on the goodwill of your countries and organizations on this issue.
General Babangida is perhaps the most prepared of past and present Nigerian leaders. For instance, it took less than 2 weeks for the Babangida government to constitute its cabinet on assumption of office. His appointees, most of them civilians, remain the best crop of Nigerian intellectuals in public office.
You are all aware of the circumstances which led to the change in the leadership of the government of this country, and I need not to repeat it here. Let me first of all congratulate all of you for a well-deserved appointment as members of the Armed Forces Ruling Council, a body which now replaces the former Supreme Military Council as the highest ruling organ of government. Your selection was made on your personal merit and experience, and not because you represent sectional or particular geographical areas of the country. I hope, therefore, that you will justify the confidence reposed in you. As members of the highest ruling organ of government, you are directly in the focus of the keen and watchful eyes of the public for your conduct of public affairs, your utterances, and general behavior. I, therefore, expect of all of you at all times loyalty, good conduct, and exemplary leadership qualities. I equally expect of you to be above board and render selfless service to the nation.
A lot of people put a lot of credit on the kind of military people we had through that period. they were looking for the people to do the job. Of course, they had to fill their own people in some ministries. But by and large, they paid attention to merit, scholarship, and objectivity and rational planning. And it didn't matter where you came from, even though they still had to look at, each state will have maybe 2 ministers or whatever. But they went out of their way to really make sure that, if you don't mind my saying so, they had among the best in that cabinet, whether it's in health, or in finance, in planning, or agriculture, in law, in what do you call it, the Attorney General's office, and so on. You know, all the people were people who had done quite well and went on to do very well even after they left that cabinet.
Bringing the likes of late Professor Ransom Kuti on, and for us at that time, we knew that, health was everywhere. Health for the first time got the recognition that it deserved. And for me, that is, it's an indelible mark in health sector development and systems in Nigeria up until today.
The economic blueprint of the IBB years remains one of the finest the country has ever had. His economic reconstruction policy was in tandem with the International Monetary Fund, IMF.
I am beneficiary of one, that was NDE, Agri Scheme. We were provided by the local government with pre-fertilizer. We paid only 200 naira, for a borehole, for a wash bowl, 400 naira for a tube well, and 800 naira for a borehole. By that time, I utilized the NDE scheme. I utilized the wheat production scheme, which was introduced by him. And again, I was given a contract in a school that he established near my local government, that is Nigeria Police Academy. So I utilized the first opportunity, second opportunity, third opportunity, all provided by the regime of General Ibrahim Babangida.
On the strength of the reforms, he introduced a structural adjustment program, SAP, after engaging in a national debate. He appointed Dr. Kalu Idika Kalu as Minister of Finance. The adoption of SAP was noble, but not without its challenges.
We had to think up our own policies within the concept of restructuring the economy. It didn't have to be like Korea or Taiwan or Japan or Zimbabwe or Kenya or Argentina or Brazil. It had to be something that would be based peculiarly on Nigeria's circumstances. But we got fixated on the name, SAP. An issue that became very vexed. You see, and it's not just Nigeria, in many developing countries. The whole concept of debt is a very negative concept, whereas it doesn't have to be. When you really think of it in more domestic terms, that's why you have banks of different sorts. They are to encourage people who have discovered projects that make sense, which they can say, if they got the money to implement, of course they'll be able to pay back from the project stream. So it doesn't have to be a negative thing, but it was a negative thing. They say we borrowed $1 billion. For Nigeria's economy, that was nothing.
As a union leader then, he set up this IMF debating committee, whether or not to take the IMF loan. And I think he kept Nigerians busy. But the point you can make, the general is a very, very intelligent and sound human being. He may not have, quote, take the IMF loan, but he adopted the policies. And our fear was not the fact of the loan, it's for the conditionalities that we were objecting to, which included devaluation and liberalizing trade, allowing imports, removing restrictions.
We told the country that this program is not going to be an easy program. It is going to be tough. But we appreciated the resilience of the Nigerian people. And we counsel that if they work hard, the program will be very, very beneficial to each and everybody in the country. But if we decide to break down or to succumb to the pressures of the reform, then we are not going anywhere. I was honest enough to say it because I realized that it is not going to be easy. And I'm glad that people realize it later after going through some of this. People who stood firm to do what we were trying to do, let's say in privatization, for example, they are now today some of our successful captains of industries in this country.
His economic liberalization policy set the tone for the process of divesting government's interests in business, enterprises, and corporations. The policy led to the privatization of state-owned enterprises in line with global trends. Babangida's administration brought about the deregulation of broadcasting in Nigeria in 1992.
After about 50 years of radio and television broadcasting in Nigeria, and where it was only government monopoly, he decided in his wisdom to allow private ownership. And that is where people like me also had an opportunity again to show interest and invested in the first private radio, invested in the first satellite television broadcasting in Nigeria, and distributed the signals across the whole continent of Africa and globally.
He established the Federal Road Safety Commission to reduce carnage on our roads and solicited the support of Professor Wole Soyinka to drive the process as pioneer chairman. In infrastructure, the IBB years birthed some of the country's most ambitious and life-transforming projects.
The Ajaokuta steel complex, which was abruptly truncated when there was a change of government in 1983. When President Babangida came back in 1985, 2 years had lapsed. It was with a little bit of struggle and with a lot of damage already done by that truncation over a period of over 2 years to resuscitate the Ajaokuta steel rolling mill, and went ahead to try to complete, as at the time he was leaving office, Ajaokuta was already over 90-95% completed.
The third mainland bridge in Lagos, stretching over 11.8 kilometers, which was once the longest bridge in Africa, linking mainland Lagos to Lagos Island, Nigeria's commercial nerve center, was completed by President Babangida. General Babangida took Nigeria on a journey of fundamental political re-engineering. He set for himself the task of bringing about a new political culture. He was in constant touch with the people. He preached attitudinal change and patience. He appealed to the understanding and the buy-in of the people to his policies and programs by deploying his charisma and power of persuasive presentation.
He was a military president, but he was very democratic. He listens to people. Even if they take decision that is not people-oriented, he reverses it to ensure that he carries everybody along. And that makes him a very democratic leader. For me, President Babangida did a lot for this country. He did so much, and his wife, she brought the idea of women, this issue of rural women that Mrs. Babangida brought, and that what also gingered Nigerian women into politics.
I was very much in contact with the general feelings within the society, I have friends that come across or cut across the entire spectrum of the society. I was interested in governance generally. So I'm always in contact with people who are affected by governance.
A transition timetable was drawn up, setting the terminal date of military disengagement for 1992. The timetable was designed to establish a gradual and graduated learning political process with the ultimate result of establishing a new political culture.
He started the process of creating the Third Republic in 1988-89 with the Constitutional Conference. I happened to be a member of that Constitutional Conference. Towards the end of the Constitutional Conference, various associations were formed towards forming political parties. But I think he was very wise in looking at the political structures around the world and found that every country that was successful had two major political parties. And if he had allowed a motley of political parties, the whole country would have been in confusion.
The National Republican Convention, NRC, was referred to as a little to the right, and the Social Democratic Party, SDP, which was a little to the left, emerged. His ultimate intention was to wrest political power from those he described as moneybags and make Nigerians equal founders and equal joiners.
Indeed, the formation of those parties and the leadership of those parties were not imposed. It was democratically done. I was elected first national chairman of the NRC in 1990 in a major convention here in Abuja. Many people did not give me any chance of winning that election, but fortunately, it came through that I won the election. The other party is the SDP, the Social Democratic Party, the one to the little left. And the head of that party, chairman, was Ambassador Babangida Kingibe. And so there were 30 states in the country at the time. And we went into elections in 1991 for the governorship. And that was the beginning of creating the Third Republic.
The presidential election pitched Mashood Kashimawo Olawale Abiola, MKO of SDP, against Bashir Tofa of the NRC. Nigerians trooped out on June 12, 1993, shunned ethnic and religious sentiments, and voted overwhelmingly for the man they thought was best suited for the job. Across the world, the June 12 presidential election is still measured as the freest and fairest that Nigeria ever had. June 12 marked a watershed in Nigeria's politics. It became the determinant of power configuration in the country. Was the annulment a political miscalculation on Babangida's part or a courageous error?
I happened to be there. You see, when you walk at that level inside with the president, you're an insider. So most of the policies that are made, most times you tend to understand them better than the people outside. The people outside don't know most times. I wasn't a policymaker, but from my observation, I can tell you that whatever is happening inside, most times is misinterpreted outside.
A lot has been said about June 12, and people perceive it on different platforms. I knew the feelings within the military establishment, and we wanted to hand over then a country or an armed forces that is not coup prone. We wanted to establish an excellent civil-military relation where a democratically elected government takes care of the country and subordinate the armed forces under the constituted authority elected by government, just like it was during the First Republic. All these are what is working on our minds when we had that annual June 12. So I knew the feeling of the military at that time. Another coup was imminent at that time. I had the information, I have the documents, I confronted some of the all, and I thought it's not fair again to plunge the country into another thing. We succeeded in carrying out a coup which was bloodless, and then we carry out another one which I think is going to be bloody and tribalistic. So that is, we are sowing the discord of a very fragile Nigeria, a Nigeria that was not the dream of our founding fathers. And we had no alternative but to resist the pressure. Do it this way. Oh no, it's because of this. I heard all sorts of things about this, but we were determined. We knew the country should be first. It's just the purpose is to save the country. And I'm glad we still have a country.
Chidi Amuta is the author of Prince of the Niger. He agrees that the June 12 election debacle is not a pleasant experience, but insists lessons have been learned.
Babangida was fully in support of his friend Abiola in terms of go for the presidency. And one of his happiest experiences was the fact that Abiola was going to defeat Tofak. But in terms of the drama of the high moment, it seems to me that his acknowledged political savvy is, deserted him at a critical moment as an observer from very close quarters. The only thing I would like to say to Nigerians is that at a critical moment, there were so many forces at play, so many contradictory forces were at play. There were factions within the military that did not wish the June 12 election well. There were factions within that same military who did not wish Babangida's political transition well. There were also factions that did not wish Abiola well. So the challenge of managing these factions to ensure that we continue to have peace and not a bloodbath was perhaps overwhelming. There would have been coups directed at Babangida, coups directed at Abiola. All kinds of coups were in the making. So those who just, come with blank condemnations are not aware of the intricacies of what could have been. People should also try and find time to reflect. What if Babangida was assassinated? What if Abiola was assassinated prior to swearing in? What if it wasn't a pleasant thing. The annulment of June 12 election was a pleasant experience for anybody. I don't think it was for Babangida.
To be a military man and run the best, freest election is something to thank God for. And I think it's a very important thing. We should not just think about that this was annulment. In life, always think about the good and the bad. If you just zero on the bad, that's not good. He ran a good election. If that election was not good, who would not be lamenting? And I happen to know that it wasn't he just that did it. I want to know that. Nigerians should stop talking about annulment only. Nobody likes it. But the fact that he ran the freest and the best election ever had in Nigeria is something to thank God for. I hope we'll have leaders, not just military men, but leaders who will run elections that Nigeria will hail as freest and the best.
Despite the enormous task it faced building a new Nigeria, the Babangida administration also played significant roles in the liberation movements in South Africa and Angola. Nigeria, under Babangida, played an active role in the peace process across the world.
Differences continue. Disillusionment may arise with democracy in the face of persistent and extreme economic hardship, side by side with the restructuring of the political process.
Nigeria was involved in restoring peaceful relations between Chad and Libya, between Burkina Faso and Mali. Nigeria took the front stage to resolve the misunderstanding between Liberia and Sierra Leone and the deep-seated economic and political problems between Ghana and Togo, just as it pushed for Morocco to return to the Organization of African Unity, or OAU. His vision for Nigeria was more cohesiveness and accelerated national integration, a self-reliant and rapidly developing economy that can hold its own and contribute to the scientific and technological progress of mankind, the emergence of a stable political order, Nigeria's emergence as a leading member of an increasingly integrated West African sub-region, and a respected member of the world community. In 8 years, between 1985 and 1993, the IBB audacity assumed the central topic for discussion in national life and the international community. Without a doubt, he had the presence of a typical dictator, yet he maintained the modesty of a gifted statesman in a democracy.
He ran government with a lot of intellectuals, and I remember people like Tai Shodare, Wole Soyinka, Dr. Chuo Kongu, Dr. Khalid Kakalo, Professor Ogomodea, and Alhaji Abubakar Alhaji, and a lot of rest of them. He is what I can represent. He represented the people and behaved like more of a politician than a military man. So he was more political than a military man.
When he was a leader, though a military head of state, but he ruled with some touch of democratic tendencies by way of consultation and also listening to the people's advice and cry. And anyhow, in order to touch people's life, since he was there for the people, he will back down when it comes to the policy where he is bringing, the people are not happy with it.
The terms of thinking through new policy choices, you cannot, IBB has a lot of law because he has this collection of brains from across the country. And that was working for him. Wherever he found the brain, regardless of where the guy come from, he will bring you in. He even brought in one of the radical guy, Uzemiro, Professor Uzemiro from University of Calabar. This was actually not just a socialist, a communist. And he co-opted him into what he called Presidential Economic Advisory Committee, which was chaired by Professor Aboyade. So when we go for that, we have a meeting with the committee to present Labour's perspective on economic and social policy choices. You will find a communist there, or a socialist of repute, who is a professor, who teaches us all the little things we know about the evils of capitalism vis-a-vis the beauty of socialism. You now find him sitting on the side of government and telling you, don't worry, we've got through it. Trust me, I'm here to represent your interests. Now, that capacity to bring people from various backgrounds, regardless of their ideological orientation, which he knows, gives every segment of society a sense of, oh, we are all involved in it.
The Babangida era was a long period of travails for himself and the Nigeria he sought to build. This was so because he chose to confront Nigerians with complex realities rather than easy options.
IBB cannot play the role of God that every other person loves. You either love him passionately or you hate him intensely. It's not the road of the middleman. No. There are those who love IBB love him passionately. And those who hate him, they hate him intensely. It's understandable because he's human. You can't say he's Mr. Perfect, no. And that was exactly what reflected during his intervention in Nigerian politics.
Typically, most Nigerians choose to remember the travails of the period that when Nigeria stood out among the Committee of Nations in the life of the IBB administration. Some Nigerians have forgotten how the country's unique relationship with the outside world blossomed. He brought to an end the indiscriminate detention of journalists and citizens by abrogating Decree 2 and 4 of his predecessor. He brought to an abrupt end the endless jail terms imposed on politicians of the Second Republic. With the benefit of hindsight, perhaps the most glorious moments of the Babangida era were the first few months into his administration. IBB brought a refreshing alternative to the draconian style of his immediate predecessors. In the same vein, political prisoners and other persons held in different detention camps were released. IBB declared an economic emergency and embarked on economic diplomacy.
That made it possible for our top captains of industries, like then Shonekon, Dan Tata, to just mention a few, part of my economic team. And so we went around the world with them, opened doors for them, and they did great businesses.
He abolished a law which previously made foreign exchange transactions an offense. This was on October 29, 1985. Persons convicted under the Exchange Control Anti-Sabotage Decree were immediately set free. Worthy of mention was the movement of the federal capital from Lagos to Abuja, when President Ibrahim Babangida signed the legal instruments under which Lagos ceased to be the capital of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. By this singular act, IBB actualized the process started by General Murtala Muhammad in 1975. Never before in the history of Nigeria has any leader made a conscious effort to bring national and economic issues to the level of ordinary Nigerians. This was the hallmark of the IBB era.
I like to look at him through the lens of better life, So for women, it became a game changer. For us to, his wife, who I'm sure is the #1 supporter, bless her soul, was able to point out, to bring out, the innate capabilities of Nigerian women to fore with the better life, starting bottom up, and which is the approach a lot of people, even in the development world, would like, the bottom up approach. That again is a plus for that administration. And then again, rural development. So the DIFRI project again was another milestone that I think that if we had continued with, we would have had a lot of openings and a lot of potentials that are hidden there at the rural areas.
He had a good reputation for economic management. He was a meticulous planner and always a step ahead of his adversaries. He was a formidable military officer who was not afraid to take tough decisions. He was, and still is, a kind-hearted Nigerian who understands the intricacies of Nigeria's multi-ethnic configurations.
when General Chukwuemeka Odumegwu came back from exile, part of the understanding with him was that they will release his father's properties. The properties belonging to Ojukwu Transport Limited. Now, there were 19 properties, 19. 14 of them were in Ikoyi. 4 were in GRA Apapa. And 1 was in Yaba. So I went to General Guzo, who was the NSA. And I said, General, I don't think this country has been fair to the Ojukwu family. He says, why? I said, this man came back. They promised him to return the father's properties to him. They didn't. If it's punishing Emeka Ojukwu that the country wants to do, the property does not belong to Emeka Ojukwu. The property belongs to his father, who actually even helped this country at a point in time when they were in need. This was November 1992. We came to Abuja, and the general took me to President Babangida, and he says, we will release the properties. Now, between November 1992 and August 20th, 1993, the properties were gazetted, and he signed them on the 24th of August, 1993. So from November to August, it was a question of about 9 months. All the properties belonging to Ojukwu Transport Limited was released. So you can see the kind of person that President Babangida is.
He remained a lovely husband to his adorable wife until death separated them. He remains a dependable ally and confidant to his children.
He loves to hear what is going on, even things that I tease him about. I mean, there's a private joke that we have that I've driven all his girlfriends away because I look after him so well. And then I tell him that if they're so serious, they won't run away. So he has the biggest sense of humor you can ever imagine. But you have to be very careful because it's a smart sense of humor because you could be taken off guard with what you say. Whenever I talk to him or talk about him, I have a smile on my face because he has really helped mold who I am today. He has taught me so many things and values instilled in me. But above everything, he has taught me to be extremely patient and extremely tolerant. And it is helping me today.
General Ibrahim Babangida may be a victim of the unintended consequences of the annulment of the June 12, 1993 presidential election. Still, his achievements stand him out as a visionary leader who made a remarkable and an enduring impact on the evolution of a modern Nigeria.
For instance, Professor Wole Soyinka was bitterly complaining about road accidents. He initiated and established Road Safety Commission and invited Professor Wole Soyinka to come and look after it. I could remember Tai Solarin was so much complaining about poverty in the country. He established People's Bank, Community Bank, and invited Tai Solarin to look after People's Bank, to give people soft loans in order to establish, to raise capital for small enterprises and small businesses. Again, Professor Jerry Gana, he was complaining in the university that people are not aware of what is government. He established MAMSA and invited Professor Jerry Gana to be in charge. So this is a listening ear. This is what people are expecting now. For somebody to say no, he has not done, I think it's bias.
The NCC for communication started under him. The mobile telephony 090 was introduced by him. National Broadcasting Commission was established by him. He liberalized banking. People, the younger generation don't know that there used to be just 5 or 6 banks in Nigeria. It was Babangida who started what you call SSS, the Defense Intelligence Agency, National Intelligence Agency, you know, as different from the police and the military intelligence. The final push that brought Mandela out, restoration of ties with Israel, restoration of ties with South Africa, support for Palestinian Liberation Organization, and all the other liberation movements. So you are dealing with somebody who, within a period of 8 years, was able to literally take apart the architecture of state and reorganized it to something he thought would be workable.
Excellent.
How are you today? Good. Thank you.
Even now, the Babangida phenomenon has become a benchmark for assessing leaders before and after him. He is acknowledged as a vital force in Nigeria's history.
I remember that for him to have achieved what he achieved and the way he's regarded in society, it reminds me that now I have to compose myself. It reminds me that I have to imbibe empathy in me as well. He's a man of a heart. He has a huge heart, and he's forever loyal to his friends.
You know, the man, I worked with him from 1987 till 1993, when he stepped aside, and I actually had to stay behind till 1994 to complete some projects I was doing then, you know. But having said that, you know, it was one of the highlights of my career. You know, when you work for somebody that actually recognize what you do and appreciate what you do, it brings the best out of you.
The Nigerians are very easy to govern if you come up with honesty and not double standard, with sense of purpose and not hypocrisy, with objectivity and openness and not being selective in the way and manner you dispense your leadership essentials. So in a new Nigeria, which we all crave for, we want to see a president that is truly Nigerian. And that is what IBB is.
He's a kind person, very kind man, very kind. Unless you don't meet him face to face, anything he has in his hand, you can take it away from him.
At his own time, this country was very united. Every area, the young people were hoping and they were encouraged to participate actively. But today, it is the government itself that goes around the whole world to inform the world that Nigerian youths are indolent, they are corrupt, they are criminally minded. They are the ones demarketing. This was something that did not happen during the IBB years.
We wanted to meet with the president. To my surprise, as we enter, we're about a 7-man delegation led by the NSC president, then Pascal Biafra. As we entered, he apparently had details of each and every one of us, including my small self. And he said, "Oh, Adams, you work like a military officer. You know, I tend to work fast." I said, "How is your wife, Clara?" That's the wife of the name of my late wife. So I'm like, how does this man know my wife's name? And how are the children? You know, one is this, you know, he got it in a brief on each and every one of us. So he called each of the 7-man delegation. And that already kind of disarm us because we came there angry.
The Babangida era remains a crucial and essential part of the narrative of the Nigerian nation state and space.
There was a military officer called Ibrahim Babangida who grew up and joined the army, and he was able to serve when the country and the army needed him at the most important time in the development of this country. And I'm glad that I did serve.
Ibro, we've done well for Nigeria. We made our mistakes. And we'll be less officers and gentlemen not to own that up. But whatever mistakes we made not deliberately. We made hoping that what we're doing was the best for Nigeria. It is now left for the generation behind us to correct those mistakes and take our country higher. So you must not have any regret whatsoever.